Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday, January 9th, 2017, believe it or not. Yes, still having to double-check that in the morning. And it's January, and it's freezing cold, and so the winter colds are setting in. Hopefully I can fend this one off for long enough to make it all the way through the week without having to give up a show here and there. It's a little tough, but NyQuil doing the trick at night, and we'll see if we can get through the daytime without needing to hire somebody to come and fix tea in the middle of the things here. Tea is something I only drink when I'm sick, although iced tea I drink all the time. Maybe I need to reverse that. Anyway, what's happening this morning? Daily Coast Radio is live, I know that, and I only know that because Bill reminds me each morning, all the way from Portland, Maine. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Today's Kagro X $1 million mystery phrase is, why not? Okie dokie artichoke. Listen in for your chance to win, and if I say the magic phrase, you come and take over the show, and I rest. How about that? Not so bad. It's a good deal. You could do this show, honestly. Read the newspaper, tell us what you think of it. I don't know. Maybe I don't give myself enough credit. What happened last night? What are people talking about this morning? The Golden Globes award show was on yesterday. I don't know what's so golden about them, really, other than the color, but you would think that would be... I had a feeling Donald Trump would be watching. It's the Golden Globes. It says golden, I'm in. Whatever it is, I'll take part of that. And I guess he did. Some Hollywood types took the opportunity, I guess, to criticize him in some way. And as I am able to gather, I didn't watch the award show. First of all, there was there was the football sport that you're not supposed to watch anymore because concussions was on. So I watched some of that, and I knew everyone would tell me what was going on the award show. And also, I don't know any of the things that won the awards, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Anyway, I guess Meryl Streep criticized Trump and took a shot at him over his mocking of the disabled reporter. And at this point, I've lost track of even what that whole thing was about. I just remember that he did it, and it was rather disgusting. And I can't believe that, you can live in America and be involved in politics and do the things that he did. I'm pretty sure, I'm not a particularly religious guy, and I don't know if I accept all the tenets of this, but if there's a hell, I think I know who's going. There's if you care about this guy, if you support him, or if he's a member of your family, or you support him politically, you can't let him not repent of that, because you will have failed in your duty as whatever religion, I assume, you practice, or no religion. You really have to get that guy to repent of that particular incident. Anyway, predictably, he was tweeting angrily at Meryl Streep because she is a failure and nobody knows her, and his ratings are better from his show or whatever. It's ridiculous, of course, but I think that the most important thing to come out of it was that he's as predictable as he ever was. He's the same guy he was during the campaign. You can bait him very easily, and he'll stay up at midnight to tweet angry things about you, and he's unfit to be president. The end. That's basically all there is about that one. I understand there was some other controversy when I finally put together the morning post, which I do the night before. At that point, I believe the big controversy regarding swirling around at the Golden Globes was about something I did not understand. And, of course, it once again had to do with controversy over, as it turns out, racial biases of one kind or another. I don't understand the controversy. I didn't get it. Apparently somebody or many people were getting the name of a show or movie or something wrong. And because it was, I guess, the cast was chiefly actors of color, people were upset, like, did white people not pay attention to this show? Well, if this white person didn't, I don't know anything about that one. Someone will have to explain that one to me, but I got it. Yeah, so I'll speak up, I guess, in support of people who have nothing to do with show business and derive none of their income from, at least from Hollywood show business. Could we call this a show business? It's not really much of a business. It's a show. We have at least got that. I've got nothing to do with it. I don't know what's going on. And also I keep coming on the air to tell you, I don't know what's happening in this sector because I'm just a suburban white guy and I live in a suburban white guy bubble. And I try to be sensitive to the fact that I don't understand things. Tell me about it. So maybe somebody can update me on that one. I believe the rest of Twitter is talking about Kellyanne Conway apparently going and defending Trump and his mocking of this reporter, and Trump himself saying, "No, I didn't do it. That wasn't what I was doing. You don't know what you're talking about." Kellyanne saying, you got to look at what is in his heart, not at his actions. Again, can't take him literally. Can never understand what this guy says. Never hold him responsible for what he says. Okay, whatever. Another big item up for bids this morning. Kate Sherrill shares with me this morning CNN's revelations, I guess, that Jared Kushner is making it his business to tell people, hey, all those crazy conspiracy theories that Donald Trump said he believed in during the campaign in order to get presumably white working class Midwesterners to vote for him for whatever reason, not because they're inclined to believe such dumb stuff, but just whatever reason. Don't worry about it. He doesn't really believe it. I don't know exactly who he was talking to, but I have got the piece here. We'll just kind of check in on it as soon as the multicolored pinwheel of death on my Mac decides, yeah, okay, I'm done processing this extraordinarily complicated CNN politics page. Nothing else will pop up afterwards, but here you go. Oh, maybe some auto-playing video. Oh, and an ad, so it was working hard to render all the stuff I don't want. Thanks very much, News Channels of America. Okay, let's see. Here comes the auto-playing video. Can I turn it off? There we go. I have to wait for it to start in order for it to turn it off. Is it one-on-one? That's an interesting profile of... maybe that's not... that looks like a reporter maybe going to talk about Kushner. Anyway... Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, personally assured skittish acquaintances, that would be, I guess, New York society types, the president-elect didn't really believe some of the more outrageous claims he was making, according to a New York magazine profile. Back when Trump was spinning birther conspiracy theories, they were lapped up by gullible Republicans. One person who talked to Kushner says he offered assurances that his father-in-law didn't really believe that stuff, the report says. So... what do you know? He was just lying to get elected. And he's not a typical politician. He's different. He's an outsider. He doesn't do the same thing. You can trust him. You can take him at his word. Just don't take him at his word. Is there more to this other than the fact that he doesn't really actually believe any of this stuff? Maybe. But let's answer the phone here for Greg and catch up on... I assume there's some more important things out there than what Donald Trump doesn't believe, which... of course, he does believe. Anyway, good morning, Greg. How you doing?
Hey, good morning. I suppose there's more important stuff out there. It's hard to tell. It depends upon what you want to pay attention to. You know, it seems to me that after election, before election, Trump's messages are certainly aimed at a certain segment of the electorate, and he has a very good way. You have to give him, his due. His tweets, his simplistic way of looking at the world definitely resonates with those who support him. Now, that happens not to be everybody, and everybody else gets annoyed at it. But, it's just the way it is. One of the interesting things to ponder is whether or not his particular messaging and style is in any way, shape, or form going to outlast him. You could have a Mike Pence say the same thing and not have it go over, for example. You could have anybody, pick somebody who might be the next Donald Trump and find that, when they say it, it just doesn't work the same way as when he says it.
Yeah, I mean, he does have a pretty particular personal style.
Right. So, okay, this is a complete tangent. I was thinking of Ted Williams this morning.
Oh.
Well, in 1941, Ted Williams hit 406. He was hitting 399 the last day, and, his manager said you could sit down, you could round it up to 400. He said, screw that, and he, got 3 hits, 4 hits, whatever he got, finished at 406. And then he became a manager / hitting instructor.
Mm-hmm.
And his method of conveying the information was, see the ball, hit the ball. And the trouble is, they couldn't do it the way he did it.
Oh.
So they got frustrated. He got frustrated, and I think he went fishing.
How was he at fishing?
I don't know. Probably pretty good, because he was
bite
pretty
the
good
worm.
at everything he did. But the point is, you couldn't just tell other people to do that. I think about that when I watch, politicians, and of course we have all sorts of criticisms about how politicians should do things. Just do this, just do that. And it's easy to say and hard to do.
Yes.
So if Obama gives advice, or even Bill Clinton gives advice on how you could be a terrific politician the way we were, you just do X, Y, it's not so easy.
No, it's not. That's true, and politicians are constantly trying to give that lesson, and it usually turns into, well, if anything,
It usually turns into Ted
Obama's.
Williams.
Yeah, yeah. Or certainly on the Republican side, they've had some mild success saying, look, you won't know what you're talking about, but say these things, and then vote this way. And that seems to work.
So the interesting part about that is that Trump will say something and everybody will get outraged, and that's his purpose and function. Sometimes, it's to distract from something else that's going on, and there's plenty of stuff to distract from because there's always stuff going on.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
He wants to tweet about the Golden Globes. The media is going to talk about the Golden Globes. What they're not going to talk about is that he's trying to get all of his cabinet nominees shoehorned into a fast blitz, so that even if nobody has enough time to actually properly vet them, who cares? Because just get it done while you're whining.
Yeah, and it's not even a matter of time. They're just not going to let themselves be vetted. Nobody has very few of them have completed filling out the otherwise, used to be anyway, mandatory paperwork.
It's the 8th. Do you have a subscription to the New York Times?
Yeah, sure.
Right. So today is, ready or not, Republicans say cabinet hearings will begin Tuesday.
Okay.
Advisors to President-elect Donald J. Trump's transition team, facing complaints from Democrats that they are trying to jam nominees through confirmation hearings, said on Sunday they're confident all the appointees would be approved by the Senate, perhaps even with Democratic support. Being the minority party, the Democrats would face long odds in trying to derail any of the nominations. They're going to seek to delay Republicans' plans to open hearings on Tuesday until the nominees have completed FBI background checks, and I think ethics checks as well. It's not right here in the story, but I don't think they've passed ethics checks either, which may well come back to haunt them if they don't do that. And I think I read somewhere that only 8 of double-digit nomination suggestions have actually submitted their tax returns, which is coming to be a rather common thing. That who cares? Why do you have to do it? Trump didn't do it.
Right. I mean, why would you?
You know what? Bernie didn't do it either. Not to open up old wounds, but it's just bad precedent not to do that, and I think we're stuck with it now.
Yes. Well, that's not so good.
Senator Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the majority leader, signaled on Sunday he was unwilling to reschedule any confirmation hearings, which are set to begin with sessions for John Kelly, Mr. Trump's choice to be Secretary of Homeland Security, and for Senator Jeff Sessions of Alabama, nominee to be Attorney General. 5 more hearings are scheduled for Wednesday. Mr. McConnell dismissed the Democrats' complaints as sour grapes during an appearance on Face the Nation. All these little procedural complaints are related to the frustration in having not only lost the White House, but having lost the Senate. So it's all sour grapes. And who the heck do they think they are if they think they're going to try to delay appointing a Supreme Court justice? It's just not done ever.
Right. That, of course, complete nonsense, but whatever. They're going to say those things.
Well, the Senate's becoming the House. I mean, if you're in the majority, whatever.
Yeah, I guess so. And I mean, there's not that much they can do about the hearings going forward. I've been trying to sort of puzzle this out. Nobody has actually been nominated, of course. I mean, there's all sorts of rumors, and usually they're taken for pretty strong and stable rumors, and it's not unusual for there to be confirmation hearings in advance of the inauguration of the new president in anticipation of those nominations. And they don't vote on confirmation until the inauguration has passed. But, the procedure people like me will point and say, I have no message from the president that any of these people have been appointed to any positions. I'm content to wait. But the committee leadership being in Republican hands. The power of the gavel is such that you can say, well, we're going to have these hearings for no reason whatsoever. And if you want to gather information about these appointees, they'll be there to answer questions. I guess you don't have to show up, but we're having the hearing anyway.
Brian Klaas, Klaas, author of The Despot's Accomplice and fellow at various governmental programs, tweets, "It's astonishing how many unprecedented violations of democratic norms that have never happened in the U.S. history are occurring simultaneously."
Yeah.
Flood the zone, you know?
Sure. Let's have them all.
You know, you have so many outrages, how are you going to cover them?
That itself is an outrage that is unprecedented, and it's happening too.
Yeah. So, you know, they're trying that same tactic with the nominees. They're also terrible. Let's just do them all at once. So which one are you going to pick up?
Yeah. Anyone you choose will be fine.
Anyone you focus on will be awful.
Right. Well, that's what I mean. It's a good choice.
Yeah. So you got to pick and choose your battles here, I guess, is the message. And again, one of those things that's easier to say and harder to do.
There are plenty of people
interesting stuff that happened, you know, because I'm sure there's a whole lot more to talk about that. And the whole process is, of course, fascinating for those of us who are process-oriented, which is to say we don't understand it. Please explain it to us, Dad. That's where you come in.
No, it won't matter anymore. But I'll try.
It won't matter anymore. If it won't matter anymore, anybody could do it.
Yeah, right. Well,
right? Just see the ball, hit the ball.
Yep. That's the way I feel about these things. It's just read the rules. What's wrong?
But as we know, it's easy to say and hard to do.
Yeah.
Here's one from Stat News, which is the Boston Globe vertical on healthcare. Like a slap in the face, dissent roils the AMA, the nation's largest doctors group. Even before the recent election, physicians felt perched on a precipice. You know all about this because we talked about this on the show, but it's having repercussions. Changes sweeping healthcare have threatened their independence, income, and influence. I didn't know we had influence. An epidemic of burnout and depression shadows the profession. I saw somebody describing burnout as a logical, rational approach when you're being asked to work in an insane system. An epidemic of burnout and depression shadows the profession, and the incoming Trump administration promises still more upheaval. Who represents doctors in this unsettling environment? Decades ago, the answer would have been clear. The AMA, the nation's oldest and largest medical organization, American Medical Association, that is. But today, medicine is a house more divided than ever. The AMA has more clout and spends more money on lobbying than the scores of medical specialty societies and splinter groups, thank you very much, that sort doctors by political leanings, but it counts fewer than 25% of practicing physicians, actually closer to 17, as members, down from 75% in the 1950s. And the association infuriated many doctors recently with his quick endorsement of President-elect Donald Trump's choice for Secretary of Health and Human Services, Representative Tom Price, an orthopedic surgeon turned congressman who's led the charge to overturn Obamacare. Just 2 weeks earlier, the AMA's House of Delegates had reaffirmed the association's support for coverage expansions under Obamacare. This felt like a slap in the face, and many physicians aren't sure if the organization really stands for us any longer, said Dr. Christian Payan, an orthopedic surgery resident at NYU Hospital for Joint Diseases and the 2014 recipient of the AMA Foundation's Leadership Award for Young Physicians. I love this. This is a orthopedic surgery resident. Not only is it very, very important that it's orthopedic surgery because they tend to be a very conservative-leaning group overall, but that it's a resident, and this is the future. Of course, it's at one of those elite New York schools, NYU Hospital for Joint Disease. Divisions within doctor ranks could make it more difficult for their voices to be clearly heard in the coming clamor to replace the Affordable Care Act with a Republican alternative. Doctors are disorganized, and it's a shame because we seriously need physician leadership to inject some sort of moral authority into this debate, said Dr. Robert Berenson, senior fellow at the Urban Institute and former high-ranking official with CMS. So you have this whole problem here where the AMA immediately jumped and said, oh, Trump's our president, therefore his guy, Price, is our guy because he's been at the AMA and he's gone through the process and he's one of us. And as the article points out, controversy erupted immediately within days. More than 700 AMA members had signed a letter protesting the endorsement as divisive. A separate petition accusing the AMA of disregarding patients' needs drew 5,500 physician signatures. And Dr. Patrice Harris, board chair of the AMA, found herself in the hot seat. And then the article talks about how, like, the AMA likes to prefer to work behind the scenes and not get this kind of publicity and do quiet negotiation. It's not going to work here, and it's not going to work with Trump. And so a lot of moral leadership is required here. But, it's Ted Williams. You can suggest it. It's easy to say, but it's hard to do, especially when your career depends upon being, in the system. So for some of us who are like in private practice and are not trying to negotiate things directly with CMS and with the government, we get to speak out. And for those of my colleagues who, in fact, are, kind of stuck in a much more difficult position, I hear you. I feel your pain. But you could withhold endorsement. You don't have to just go all out resist. It's still important to recognize that just saying that, hey, price is great is not what doctors are really that interested in. And it is interesting that many articles, reporters who cover this and people who do, data collection on it, for example, CrowdPack, who can tell you which physician groups are donating to what groups. Physicians aren't like solidly conservative anymore. It's split 50-50, just like the country is. It may have to do with what profession you're in. That's why that orthopedic little anecdote there was remarkable. But it's still true. And so, it's the doctors are not going to speak with one voice, but the upside of that is that one voice is not going to be a conservative voice.
Well, apparently not. Meanwhile, a good percentage of the country wants to know what's wrong with the Ask Me Anything stuff. I don't understand why these doctors are so angry about Ask Me Anythings.
Yeah.
They have no idea. I mean, AMA is meaningless to a number of today's voters, let's say. I don't know if that's because they're so super smart or anything. I'm just saying.
Aaron Carroll, health doctor, pediatrician, and healthcare analyst.
Okay.
Writes at the Incidental Economist. Just has a tweet I told him to pin because you need to remember this constantly. And he writes, "Please remember, however you'd like to reform healthcare, there will be trade-offs. Those who promise you everything are lying."
Okay.
Right? And so the question is, all right, what are the trade-offs? Well, that's where it gets to be difficult. Let's do that behind closed doors.
Okay.
Ask me anything.
Right.
Well, what are you working on right now? Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Mysterious, to say the least. Okay.
Yeah.
In
a way, not so mysterious. But anyway, you have all of that. By the way, just as an aside, Barack H. Obama, J.D., put in an article in the New England Journal of Medicine, which was published on January 6th, repealing the ACA without a replacement, the risks to American healthcare. What does he know about it?
Yeah. Well, he was around.
He was around. And if anybody has time, there is an absolutely fascinating story that Norm Ornstein reminded us, and I will try to fetch it. I didn't have that in my list for today, but he recently tweeted that, and I will have it by the end of the show so I can give it to Scott Anderson, who is our crackerjack, puts this thing together for later, so makes coherent sense of links. Norm Ornstein talked about the actual origins of how Obamacare happened. How they tried to work the process, how they tried to involve Republicans. It's really a fascinating read, a reminder of how the Senate tried to start with a Republican-based plan, trying to incorporate Republicans into working with the administration to come up with something good.
Yes.
How Mitch McConnell said from on high, do not do this, do not cooperate in any way, shape, or form. Same thing in the House. And that obstinate refusal to work with Democrats is actually what convinced conservative Democrats like Joe Lieberman at the time in the Senate to do the 60 votes that got it passed.
Yeah.
Those 60 votes would not have happened if Republicans had cooperated. It might have been a different group of 60, but there would have been Democratic dissent if Republicans had cooperated, because some conservative Democrats didn't want this. But in the face of Republicans saying, okay, just do this, fine, I did that. All right, I'm still voting against it. Chuck Grassley's famous for that. Incorporate this. Incorporate tax breaks into it. Okay, fine. Well, I'm still not voting for it.
Yes.
So after realizing that in fact was the game, it ticked off even the conservative Democrats to go ahead and vote with this. So the idea that Chuck Todd and others would bring up that, well, the whole problem with Obamacare is it was forced through by Democrats is a load of bullpucky. Oh. And it's really worthwhile remembering exactly how that happened so that you don't fall into that trap.
Yeah. I saw a little bit of it, and I noticed that he also began with the Obama stimulus program as well, and same dynamic there.
Yep. That's it. Same dynamic.
But, yeah, and the size of the appropriations were trimmed back considerably. Half of it was tax cuts. All of that was Republican ideas designed to get them to buy in, and they didn't. So, okay.
Okay, I think actually I found it. And that story was from July 6, 2015, and it was in The Atlantic. And there it is. And it's really quite good. And it's a terrific process story if you go through it step by step in terms of how things are supposed to work. And then, of course, what you try to do is you say, okay, well, if that's how that worked, how are things going to work now? And then that's where I start to draw a blank and say, it's not so easy to make those correlations because it's a different time, different place, different dynamic, and different group of people in the Senate.
Yeah. True. That changes everything. In addition, but it was a remarkable series of events. Certainly, I don't know. It's but well worth taking into account. And one area where there's still a lot of I don't know if I would say it rises to for some people it rises to bitterness, but a lot of anger about Obama being slow to realize what he was really up against. I don't know how
this article argues
that's
in fact the opposite. That he knew exactly what he was up against, and that's why he did it this way.
Yeah,
and that's how it got passed.
There are many ways to explain it, certainly. I mean, I don't think that he was at a loss as to what he was up against. It's just a matter of there's really no way to just browbeat people who are dug their heels into changing their votes. You can't do that. You can only put together a package that will manage to get through some other way instead. And for some, as you mentioned, for some conservative Democrats, what it actually took was the ability to point to, well, we hung this one out there for Republicans. The fact that they never came to the table is their fault, but this is how reasonable we were. That's why I can go along with this when it comes to we got to get those 60 together.
Right. So here's where he says that. To be sure, the extended negotiations via the Gang of Six made a big difference in the ultimate success of the reform, but for other reasons. That is to say that the Republicans are dropping out left and right. When Republicans like Hatch and Grassley began to write op-eds and trash the individual mandate, I forgot they did that, but they did. You're trying to get Grassley to work with you, and he turns around and he writes an op-ed saying this is the most terrible, horrible thing that happened since the future Benghazi that didn't happen yet,
right.
Which they had earlier championed as unconstitutional and abominable. Those are the words they were using. It convinced conservative Democrats in the Senate that every honest effort to engage Republicans in the reform effort had been tried and cynically rebuffed. So, when the crucial votes came in the Senate in late December 2009, Harry Reid succeeded in the near impossible feat of getting all 60 Democrats, from Socialist Bernie Sanders and Liberal Barbara Boxer to Conservatives Joe Lieberman, Ben Nelson, Mark Pryor, and Blanche Lincoln, to vote for cloture, to end the Republican filibuster and pass their version of the bill.
Yep.
That's actually a pretty remarkable thing that Harry Reid did.
Yes.
And Harry Reid did it, and it was in the Senate. And is that Obama pushing it through despite the objections of Republicans? No, it's actually using the procedures you have available to you because Republicans were writing op-eds about how this is abominable and terrible and the worst thing that's going to happen since the future of Benghazi that hasn't happened yet. You can't work with that.
No.
Just a reminder. So it's, again, it's the Ted Williams thing. It's easy to say, and it's hard to do in terms of you should just do this, this, and this because it's a better way of getting stuff done that you want done. Yeah. Well, actually, it's hard.
Yep. It rather is.
It rather is. Anyway, that's my rant for today. I get annoyed when I see people rewrite history and say, we won, therefore let me explain to you how Obamacare was really passed. I wasn't there, but my interpretation of it is that it was all terrible, and everything that happens from this point onward that's bad is because it's Obama's fault.
Right. Well, we knew that was the plan. They said as much right at the beginning.
The Republican and Democratic reactions to the Russian hacking is still in the news.
Yes.
And this, I have to read a very short tweet storm for you.
All right.
Seven long. From Sherry Jacobus.
Oh, yeah, okay.
She is a Republican operative. Early on, was trying to work with the Trump team, got into some disagreements about some policy, got trashed, has been an ever-Trumper ever since. And she has this really interesting reminder of how hacking really works.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to know.
She actually was, at this point in time, and the point in time would be about August of 2016, and starting to give some information to the press about some of the things that the Trumps were doing that were not necessarily kosher.
Okay.
They were starting to organize against Trump, and then the Republicans were starting to attack them. And this Politico article appears in August 2016, titled Anti-Trump Operatives, and Sherry Jacobus is one of them, targeted in online catfishing scheme.
Yeah.
Posing as a British solicitor, a con man sought information on the operatives' plans to attack Trump.
Okay.
The fellow's name is Stephen Wessel. So let me just throw this into the Skype queue there right at the bottom. So that's the article we're talking about here. Stephen Wessel is a convicted con man with a Big Apple flair, feigning connections to Ronald Reagan, pretending to be an Oxford man while bilking rich Manhattanites at $750,000. But his last scam before heading to prison this spring targeted a very different kind of mark, Republican operatives opposed to Donald Trump. And now these operatives are wondering who put Wessel up to it. Assuming a variety of fake online identities, including that of a female solicitor in England, Wessel gushed in emails, phone calls, and Twitter messages about it. I just have these visions of Marlon Brando dressed up in drag, which he did. That was in Missouri Breaks.
You didn't have to do it over the computer, but...
Wessel gushed in emails, phone calls, and Twitter messages about made-up extramarital affairs with the likes of Lee Atwater, showered Marks with gift cards to the swanky Mandarin Oriental, and invited them to go pheasant hunting in Scotland, all in an apparent attempt to glean more about the operatives and their intentions regarding Trump. In a campaign season marked by the mind-bending, the until now unreported caper of Wessel's month-long catfishing operatives, Rick Wilson, Liz Mayer, and Sherry Jacobus ranks among more bizarre episodes. It could get more bizarre still. The targets of the scheme do not believe Wessel, described by his own lawyer as mentally ill, was acting alone. This month, Jacobus, who said she believes Wessel was working in concert with allies of Trump, renewed her efforts to get the FBI to investigate the scheme. That's basically the story. So, just as Politico is calling Team Trump to inform them that this is the article, Sherry Jacobus's email is hacked. Okay? And she goes on to say, the universe of people who knew the article was coming was very small. After Team Trump was informed, I was hacked before it was published.
Wow.
She says, should WikiLeaks have personal information that can only be gleaned from my hacked email, the road leads directly to Trump or his people. That means Trump or Bannon can simply issue the order for political detractors to be hacked and ensure WikiLeaks will get the info.
Oh, yes.
Hacking of emails is a federal crime with prison sentence. If link between Trump and hacking of emails is found, bigger than Watergate. And somebody else online said, you know what? Watergate took 3 years to develop. So just because you don't have anything right now and you have suspicions, they're just suspicions. Consider them that. It's not a smoking gun. Don't consider it that. But also don't consider it case closed.
Yeah, I guess not. However, I think things are weird in these days, and of course...
Whether the hacking is done by Russians, I'll finish up because it's only two more. Whether the hacking is done by Russians, Breitbart, or some hired gun, if ordered by Trump or his team, we've got a Watergate. WikiLeaks is providing the hacked mails by the hackers, and the hackers are told who to hack.
Yeah.
The timing of my hack is interesting. She leaves it at that. But then you have WikiLeaks Online threatening people, which did happen this past week. I don't know if you caught that.
Yes,
WikiLeaks said that they were going to not have a problem doxing critics in terms of revealing their name, address, phone number, and so on and so forth.
Yes. They were going to put together an online database that not only were they going to have it, everyone could look and try and find out who their family members, where did they work, where did they live, etc.
Right. So I thought in context of that, this Sherry Jacobus little tweet storm and reminder of what happened to her is actually rather fascinating. There is no direct link of WikiLeaks to Russia, but there's plenty of indirect links claimed by the intelligence community. Yes, you can argue about did you provide evidence? Well, that's the part that is classified, and so we haven't seen it. But obviously people are going to believe what they want to believe. But it's not hard to put these, this picture together and say there's something here, and I think there's a lot more to be investigated. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely
without jumping in front to conclusions that we don't have proof of.
Yeah. It's going to be an amazing thing to watch his supporters. I mean, they're already out there, of course, saying not only his supporters, but even people who are ostensibly opposed to Trump, still, of course, saying we do have a bit of a different atmosphere here. I mean, there are people who, I guess, when his Watergate comes, will say, but wasn't the truth revealed here? This hacking told us what was really going on behind the scenes. It's a public service. It ought to be considered. There are people who offer that up.
Right, and so what did we learn that you didn't already know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Where was the scandal?
I don't know. I mean, I thought this was true, but now I can prove it. Okay.
And by the way, when you make that reference, be clear, are you talking about Podesta or are you talking about the DNC? Because those are two different hacks.
No, it's all the same because there was a D in both of them. Yeah.
There's a D in dumb, too.
Well, that's true. But, that's a very common conflation, certainly. We still see it happening.
All right, let's see. How long is this particular one? This one is 22. Do you have time for a 22 tweet read?
Yes, I have time for anything. Any part of the show anyone wants to carry today is
I'm trying to rest your voice for you. You sound a little hoarse, and I'm hoping this will help.
I feel like a little hoarse.
Which is my excuse for I always interrupt David. If you listen to the show, you know this is true.
Yes.
This is Topher Spiro, Vice President for Health Policy, Center for American Progress, and a little bit about healthcare again. Because again, I think the attempt to try to get rid of Obamacare as quickly as possible, regardless of the consequences, a rather stupid maneuver nonetheless that the Republicans are going to attempt and may well succeed on, is worth focusing. To get Topher Spiro on the Republican hypocrisy on Obamacare, let me review the Republican hypocrisy on Obamacare. Bear with me. They attack the ACA legislative process for lack of transparency. But over a year, we had countless public hearings, publicly available legislative texts, and estimates by the Congressional Budget Office. For many months, too many months really, Democrats tried in vain to negotiate with the Republicans. We just covered that with Norm. Now Republicans are rushing to rip the ACA apart before showing us their replacement plan. No hearings, no legislative text, no CBO scores, no attempt to negotiate. We have to pass the bill to find out what's in the replacement. Can you believe this stuff?
Oh, yes.
They attack the use of budget reconciliation to make tweaks to the ACA. Now Republicans are rushing to use budget reconciliation to undo the law. They attack the ACA's high deductibles, and it's true, we need to improve the law to lower deductibles. But now every single Republican replacement plan would increase deductibles. They want to guarantee only skimpy catastrophic coverage. They attack the ACA for causing a premium death spiral. Analysts just concluded the ACA is a premium life spiral. Premium increases were a one-time correction, and cites a Bloomberg article for the same thing. Now Republicans want to unleash an actual death spiral. They do so by repealing the individual mandate immediately. They attack the ACA for not allowing you to keep your plan if you like it. It's true not everybody can keep their plan, but some got tax credits to offset premiums, and some got new plans with better coverage. And Charles Gaba and other experts have estimated that the number of people total in the country who are talking about that really were affected by the non-ESI stuff. It is single digits, estimates between 3 and 6% of the entire population. It's true, not everybody keep their plan, but some got tax credits to offset premiums, some got new plans with better coverage. Now Republicans want pretty much everybody to change plans or lose coverage altogether. Can you believe this stuff? If you like your plan, you can have a higher deductible or just have it terminated. They attack the ACA for failing to provide universal coverage, and this one gets me really pissed. Now Republicans are jeopardizing coverage for 30 million Americans, and not a single replacement plan would cover it as many people. They attacked the ACA's so-called death panel, which was really just giving seniors the option of voluntary end-of-life counseling. And now Republicans are taking steps to ration care and take away coverage from people whose lives depend on it. End. And then a link to Politico with the headline, GOP resistance grows to Obamacare repeal without replacement. Because of all those things, it's one thing to try to persuade credulous reporters that, no, we're just doing what the public wants, and it's another thing to persuade the public that this is just what the public wants.
Well, no doubt that poses something of a challenge, but this is I'm trying to catch up on. I'm reading behind you a little bit on this one, but Well, definitely the case that certainly the procedural hypocrisy is obvious, but I mean the overall story here being the ultimate death panel, essentially throwing 30 million people off of the insurance rolls and saying, or somebody tweeted over the weekend, I think I can't recall whose metaphor it was, but this was like throwing you, pushing you off a cliff and saying we'll figure it out before you land. Before we hit the bottom. I forget who actually tweeted that. Or mentioned it on the air, or however it can. All things are tweeted these days. Nothing actually happens in the real world. But, I'm glad that there's at least some growing opposition in Republican ranks that will make the procedure difficult for them.
Yeah, and as to be expected, it'll be on the Senate side.
Yeah, we'll see whether it holds. I don't know.
No guarantees.
No. The Senate is a weird place, to be sure.
That's what people in the House always say, but you know what? It's true. Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm happy to follow that one. We'll have no choice, obviously, but to follow it. But, this is the roadmap for Senate procedure through this repeal is really unclear at this point, and I can make no predictions about where they're going, except the really cynical one that all the objections will fall by the wayside when the time comes, and they will simply steamroller through this whole thing.
Otherwise known as the Susan Collins approach.
Yeah.
Much troubles her, but she votes the party line when push comes to shove. Which is what we used to say here in Connecticut about Chris both ways shaves.
Yeah. Right.
Talks a good game, but, votes for Newt Gingrich.
Yeah. And I'm afraid that just may be the outcome. The question is, when does it come? How long do they play the game?
Yeah, and then if and when it happens, what are the true consequences, and what kind of political price are they willing to pay for it? So we shall see. That's about as far as I can take it today. Okay. Sorry. Got to go to work.
All right, Armando, come on in. What do you have for us today?
Josie, Joan, anybody here? So there you have it.
Thank you.
Do rest your voice. And, I don't know how you do that while you do a radio show, but you're smart. You'll figure it out.
We'll just do it this way.
You're one of those Eastern elites. You can do those kind of things.
Yes. I'm not like one of the, okay. Well, all right. We have some things to talk about on that front too, but I may have to wait to gather up the materials I read over the weekend. A lot of things passed by over the weekend, and I said, this would make a great conversation, and I did not gather them in one place. All right.
Alrighty. Well, that's part of my function here is to give you a few extra minutes in the morning to have some coffee, make breakfast, and, maybe find a few links. So hopefully we've done what we need to do. For those of you who don't know, David and I have been friends for an awfully long time, and I always enjoy talking with him on the show. Take care, and I'll be back with you on Wednesday.
All right. Terrific. Thanks so much. We'll see you then, and you and Joan can do the show on Wednesday.
Take care.
Thank you. All right. Time for some, let's see. We need the producers in here to make the tea and the soup and all sorts of things to get me through the show here today. Let's see. First of all, we can definitely double back and clarify. In case I wasn't the only one that didn't know what the hell was going on with the Golden Globes, both Justice and Kate Sherrill have filled me in a little bit. And let's see, the story is, and this is exactly what I was thinking of, was Justice tells me that Jenna Bush, I guess, was there working as a journalist and asked Farrell about his nomination, as she said, for Hidden Fences. Now, that was the issue and the hashtag which caught on, Hidden Fences. And I said, What? That doesn't ring a bell for me, and I guess the reason it doesn't ring a bell for me is there is no Hidden Fences. There is, however, Hidden Figures, the movie about the black women who did the math and calculus for the NASA moon flights, and for which Pharrell, I guess, wrote the score. And Jenna Bush conflated it with another movie about black life titled Fences, and combined the two of them. All the black movies are the same thing, and it's Hidden Fences. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Fences, I guess. It was also a martial arts film as well. I don't know. I don't know where that came from. Kate Sherrill's explanation, much the same, obviously, because it's not fake news, so it was easy for the two of them to coordinate on their stories because it was the real story. Two radically different movies featuring black leads, but they all look alike, I guess, to Jenna. Hidden Figures and Fences, reporter, and I guess either, well, maybe you didn't recognize Jenna Bush, or maybe you didn't see the report. I don't know. I didn't know who did it. Justice says it was Jenna Bush, elided into Hidden Fences. So, okay. Whoops. That's not so good. I don't really know what motivation was behind it, but it's fun to guess. And the fact that it was Jenna Bush just makes it I don't know. I guess that much more of an eye roll thing. I don't care to bash George W. Bush's kids anymore at this point. It is a little bit weird that she ended up as a reporter, but she had to pick a profession somewhere, and I guess they probably figured, what could you ruin? What could go wrong as a sort of a light entertainment pop culture reporter? You surely know about that. I couldn't do that job, so I guess I can't complain. I'd be like the interview. How do you feel about the project of some sort that you worked on, guy? Is he wearing his odd hat? I'd say that's how I recognize you, with your odd hat on. Although I think I could recognize Pharrell pretty well now. I mean, he's ultra famous and all, but I don't get to see much in the way of programming that he participates in. But I thought he had a pretty distinctive face, and not just because of the crazy hat either. But, well, maybe that was what did it. But at least she recognized him for that. Right? She didn't walk up to him and ask some other crazy thing about some other black person. I guess that's credit, the only credit I can give you. And, of course, I would never have been able to tell you that he worked on the score of anything. I don't know, unless somebody tells me. But you know what? I bet they brief their entertainment reporters a little bit, probably more than they brief the president-elect about world affairs that could kill us all, as a matter of fact. So I guess there's that. Maybe they could see if they can carry that over. All right. Well, anyway, the main takeaway from the Golden Globes night seems to be the lack of recognition of the irony of Donald Trump, reality television celebrity turned politician, sort of, except I'm not a politician, yada yada, telling all other celebrities that they need to just shut up and stick to acting and leave the rest of the world to this other guy who decided not to stick to acting and enter into politics. No one can really understand that. It's hypocrisy of the first order. You know that. You don't need me to tell you. But we'll make a point of putting it out there, because that's, I think, the sum total of what we gleaned from last night. That, and of course, that Trump is still baitable by pop culture nonsense and brief, fleeting moments on television, statements made by celebrities. So, okay. Moving on then, let's take a look at the other things we have put aside, both in pocket and in as many open tabs during Greg's segment. We have, for instance, I did put aside that Politico story about the anti-Trump operatives being targeted in the catfishing scheme. That was really rather bizarre, but I think we got the gist of that one. But there were some really interesting details in there about the lengths to which the this time, and I think it was the Trump operation rather than an actual Russian operation. I don't know. That's the sense I got from it anyway. But the lengths that they were going to try and draw in Republican operatives that they later, I guess, the idea was to be able to have material available to undermine them, either should they turn anti-Trump or even if they could be driven to become anti-Trump operatives. The play was to be able to say, well, for at least for Sherry Jacobus here, to be able to say, well, this is a disgruntled job seeker. That's why they're anti-Trump. It was a weird and bizarre play, to be sure. There are also a couple other strange articles that probably need to be caught up on and shared. Let's see. I'll make a quick scan and make some decisions. Oh, yes. Just by way of bringing us up to date on this news, just before we closed out on Friday, it had broken. So it now seems like old news, but we got to catch up on it and at least make a note of it. CNN's reporting here on under the byline of Manu Raju, Deirdre Walsh, and David Wright, all on this one article. Trump asking Congress, not Mexico, to pay for border wall. Yeah, another sort of campaign promise fallen by the wayside. This time, of course, the main campaign promise. And I'm sure the excuse will be, and it already is being made, well, sure, we'll lay out the initial money for the border wall, but we're going to make Mexico pay us back at some point. And, of course, the plans that have been floated don't really have anything to do with having Mexico as a government pay us back or pay up front or at all for the wall, but rather to make Mexican Americans and Mexican nationals individually pay fees that may or may not be put towards the construction of the wall, which makes it even worse and that much more unfair. Anyway, that's the story, CNN's explanation of it. President-elect Donald Trump's transition team has signaled to congressional Republican leaders that his preference, is to fund the border wall through the appropriations process. As soon as April, according to House Republican officials, the move would break a key campaign promise when Trump repeatedly said he would force Mexico to pay for the construction of the wall along the border. Though in October, Trump suggested that for the first time that Mexico would reimburse the U.S. for the cost of the wall. Trump defended that proposal Friday morning in a tweet, saying the move to use congressional appropriations was because of speed. The dishonest media does not report that any money spent on building the Great Wall, for sake of speed, will be paid back by Mexico later, Trump tweeted Friday. Of course, who cares what your plans are? Call us when you get the check, I guess. Let's see. Does it have any more detail about exactly how the reimbursement is supposed to work? New York Representative Chris Collins said Friday that American taxpayers would front the cost for the wall, but he was confident Trump could negotiate getting the money back from Mexico. When you understand that Mexico's economy is dependent upon U.S. consumers, Donald Trump has all the cards he needs to play. Collins, congressional liaison for the Trump transition team, told CNN's Allison Camerata on Newsday. On the trade negotiation side, I don't think that it's difficult for Donald Trump to convince Mexico that it's in their best interest to reimburse us for building the wall. We'll see about that. The Trump team argues that it will have the authority through a Bush-era 2006 law to build the wall, lawmakers say, but it lacks the money to do so. Transition officials have told House GOP leaders in private meetings that they'd like to pay for the wall in the funding bill. A senior House GOP source said, it was not done in the Obama administration, so by funding the authorization that's already happened a decade ago, we could start the process of meeting Mr. Trump's campaign pledge to secure the border, Indiana Republican Representative Luke Messer said on Thursday. Messer admitted it's big dollars, but it's a question of priorities. He pointed to a border security bill that Homeland Security Chairman Mike McCall proposed last year that cost roughly $10 billion. Democrats may well find themselves in a position to shut down all of government to stop the build-out of a wall or a barrier or of a fence, Messer said, so they're not really sure what they're paying for, but they're sure it's going to be $10 billion. Mexican leaders have repeatedly said they will not pay for the wall. If Mexico refuses to pay for the wall, the GOP could add billions of dollars into the spending bill that needs to pass by April 28th to keep the government open, but doing so would force a showdown with Senate Democrats and potentially threaten a government shutdown. No decisions have been made, Republican sources said. Republicans point out that then Senator Barack Obama, Chuck Schumer, and then Senator Hillary Clinton voted for the 2006 bill, and argued that since Democrats backed that bill, they should support efforts to fund the current effort. Of course, that would have been a gigantic omnibus bill, I'm sure, of some sort, and it may or may not have contained an authorization for such a wall, but without any hope of appropriating any money for it, nor any chance of it being approved of by the administration that took over shortly thereafter. It was a relatively safe vote. The thinking behind the strategy is that it's harder for Democrats to filibuster spending bills because of the high stakes involved if they fail to pass in time. That would be a government shutdown. There is that floating out there, and it always does seem to be a problem for the minority party enforcing a government shutdown. However, it is almost always been, it has almost always been the case that it is Republicans forcing that shutdown, and always over the insistence that too much money is being spent in the budget. We'll see whether it works exactly the same way when it's Democrats in the minority and they're shutting down a ridiculous project to which a vast swath of the American public objects. Anyway, certainly there's a vast swath that supports it too, no doubt, but this is a rather unpopular president and one of his least popular proposals, as it turns out. Okay. But still one that he's sticking by for whatever reason, because it was central to his campaign, and he's still embarrassed to say he's not going to build it. Let's see, what else do we have in this article? Steve Scalise of Louisiana, the number 3 Republican in House leadership, declined to say on Thursday if Congress would pay for the wall. We want President Trump to have all the tools he needs to build the wall. We're in talks with him on the details of it as they're putting together their team. We've still got a few months left before there's another funding bill that's going to move. We're going to work with him to make sure we can get it done. We want to build a wall. He wants to build a wall. Could Mexico pay for this border wall? Let's find out. Trump himself has estimated his border wall would cost about $8 billion. Other analysts put it at about $10 billion. Just $2 billion difference, no big deal. The proposals Trump has outlined to coerce Mexico into paying involve controversial measures that would still likely fail to cover the wall's full cost. According to Trump's website, those steps could include remittance seizure, potential tariffs, and foreign aid cuts. The tariffs are going to pose a problem with NAFTA, but he hates NAFTA, so that's okay. Increasing fees on temporary visas issued to Mexican CEOs and diplomats, and gosh, there's just billions of those. Increasing fees on border crossing cards, increasing fees on NAFTA worker visas, and increasing fees at ports of entry to the U.S. from Mexico. In other words, a raft of protectionist tariffs prohibited by NAFTA, and which would have the net effect of making slowing international trade with one of our biggest trading partners and raising the prices of all those goods, which, on the other hand, I'm not necessarily opposed to in principle, although targeting them to force some of the poorest folks doing any work here in the United States at all seems a little less than fair, let's say. That would be putting it as mildly as possible. A major challenge for judging Trump's proposal is that most of those steps amount to a drop in the bucket, less than $1 billion compared to the proposed cost of the wall. And the one step that could provide the required amount of money, remittance seizure, would face major legal obstacles in addition to the likelihood of severe domestic and international backlash. Total U.S. foreign aid to Mexico is less than $200 million a year, by the way. It's $186 million in the 2014 fiscal year. So redirecting all of that money to a border wall would only put a mild dent in the $8 billion bill. Doesn't even rise to the level of dent in my view. And it's difficult to know the amount of revenue generated by a tariff on Mexican exports or to account for potential losses from a retaliatory tariff without the specifics of the tax. Moving next to fee increases, Trump says on his website that even a small increase in visa fees would pay for the wall. This includes fees on border crossing cards, of which more than 1 million are issued a year. But the fees for visas and border crossing cards range from around $150 to $200 each, according to State Department data. accounting for all the fees on over 1 million border crossing cards and visas in a year, and even accounting for a twofold increase in those fees, that would still only generate about $500 million, well short of an $8 billion price tag. Never mind a $10 billion price tag. The biggest potential source of money for the wall would come from remittance seizure. Remittance payments are monies that immigrants, legal and illegal, as they say, earn in their country of residence and send back to their families in their native country. In other words, if you come here, even if you come here legally and work your butt off and make money and send it back to your family, trying to make a better life for them legally by the sweat of your own brow, Donald Trump will seize it to build a wall to make sure that you can no longer come here and do that. What a fair thing to do. It's so nice and so capitalist, too. It is, after all, their money. We're just going to seize it and make it our money because small government. That's where it stands. According to the Bank of Mexico, that's it. It's not even capitalized. Is it not like capital B, Bank of Mexico? Is it a state? Is it a national bank? The Bank of Mexico. They make it sound like there's only one bank there. Mexico received $24.8 billion in remittance payments in 2015. Okay. So that could pay for the wall. But then you're talking about literally seizing almost every dollar earned by anyone who's sending money to Mexico for whatever reason. A Fox News Latino report, how could that even exist, calculated that 97% of remittance payments received by Mexico in the first 3 months of 2015 came from the U.S., and the Pew Research Center similarly reported that nearly all of Mexico's remittance payment revenue comes from the U.S. Seizing all of that money would probably be more than enough to pay for the border wall. That's if there's no cost overruns. But by the way, if you, in fact, do run over, then you're actually in danger of seizing all the money sent by anyone to Mexico for any reason, any individuals, back to families anyway. And then maybe you'll actually cover the full costs of this thing after all. Trump says on his website that he would use the Patriot Act to require legal identification for money transfer transactions, according to his website. But CNN legal analyst Paul Callan says Trump's plan would likely face multiple legal battles, and it will probably eat up a good portion of the money that they hope to seize as well. The Mexican immigrants Trump seeks to target are clearly not the radical Islamic terrorists that the Patriot Act was designed to fight, says Callan. The courts are likely to review or to view Mr. Trump's use of the always controversial Patriot Act as improper and illegal. The proposal may also fail to place pressure on the Mexican government, as money can be smuggled back to Mexico in many other creative ways if wire transfers are cut. Wire transfers give American companies the opportunity to take a small percentage of those transfers, cut that off. I mean, I don't care. So Western Union doesn't make that money. I mean, to me, man, all right. So some job losses at Western Union, I guess. But gosh, this border is so rock solid, nothing gets through. Or, importing massive amounts, apparently, of of drugs that aren't particularly stealthy and are pretty bulky and smelly at that. There's no way we could get bricks of money back in the other direction, right? And of course, it will cost the people who send the money back that much more. The fees, I assume, will be outrageous if they can even count on the money getting where it's going. So it's basically a full employment for border gangsterism measure. But hey, no problem. The size of Mexico's remittance revenue far surpasses any other revenue-raising proposal from Trump and would probably be the most effective way to pay for the border wall. But looking at the obstacles that such an action would face, it's difficult to envision a path to impounding those payments to pay for the wall. And not to mention just the justification of it. I mean, no doubt that Trump's supporters would be easy enough to get past. Hey, they're Mexicans, so who cares whether they're treated outrageously unfairly? That doesn't worry me a great deal. I mean, the fact of doing it to people does, but the question of can they get Trump supporters to support a completely ridiculous, over-the-top, unconstitutional, unfair, immoral impounding of anything earned by anyone who happens to have any Mexican ancestry? I don't think so. That's not going to trouble them. They can get past that pretty easily. Sure, screw them. There you go. That's how it's done. All right, so at least we're up to date on that particular issue, and you have, if you didn't have a clear idea of how Trump really thought he was going to, quote unquote, make Mexico pay for it, the answer is he's going to make Mexican immigrants pay for the wall, even the ones who got here legally, and that's just so fair and nice. You can understand. Let's see. A few other weird stories that feel like they ought to be a part of today's roundup. Let's see. Here's one that's not breaking news per se, but just harkens back to something we talked about earlier in the campaign season. And because it's from Vox, it's important, and we'll explain something to you that we just couldn't grasp otherwise, and maybe there are even some cards to help us. Okay, we understood this one. Sort of surprised to see Vox taking this one on, but gosh, they're fearless. I'm just kidding. I kid because I have it open on my screen, is basically the issue here. All right, Vox, taking us back to the topic of the weirdness of the alt-right and the strange similarities that the alt-right and Trump world bears, in our view, to sex cults. You remember when we made that accusation during the campaign? Well, here's more on that. And now Vox is writing it, so now you know it's not just me saying it. How the alt-right's sexism lures men into white supremacy. It's an interesting interplay of subject matters here on the roiling cauldron, I guess we could say, that is the alt-right. The movement's many online communities, and there are several, prey on male insecurity to advance a racist political agenda, and you will find that it becomes quite familiar as we read through it. It says here in the byline, updated by. That's an interesting kind of byline. Aja, A-J-A, Romano. I don't know how she pronounces her first name, but, write and tell me if you happen to hear it. Okay, so here we go. In the wake of the election, perhaps no topic has been more widely discussed and debated than the self-described alt-right, that in scare quotes, of course, the racist, sexist, meme-happy, mostly internet-based movement associated with radical white supremacy that has unexpectedly taken center stage in U.S. politics after the election of Donald Trump. Though many consider the alt-right to be primarily a fringe movement encompassing multiple ideologies, and that's true, including, by the way, white nationalism and white supremacy, its supporters' unorthodox tactics for promoting those ideologies were fundamental to Trump's campaign and thus fundamental to his victory. Said tactics include engaging in extremist discourse, using deceptive irony and racially tinged internet memes to confuse people into dismissing the alt-right label as a synonym for internet trolls, and spreading false and misleading information. Thus, it's no surprise that the movement has become a focal point of the subsequent culture war and narrative surrounding the president-elect's transition to the White House, particularly outrage that Trump arguably won through racist rhetoric and that his chief strategist is directly associated with the alt-right movement. But one foundational aspect of the alt-right's various belief systems has been significantly downplayed following the election, even though it may be the key to understanding the movement's racist white nationalist agenda. I don't think we're ever going to understand it, by the way, but it's good to try to keep tabs on it. One day the light will dawn on us, I'm sure. To no end, because it will change. As soon as you figure out what they're about, they have a very strong interest in remaining inscrutable and unpredictable. So I don't hold out a great deal of hope for ever coming to understand them. Anyway, while it's true that the movement is most frequently described in terms of the self-stated explicit white supremacy that defines many of its corners, for many of its members, the gateway drug that led them to join the alt-right in the first place wasn't racist rhetoric, but rather sexism. Extreme misogyny in evolving from male bonding gone haywire. most of us are, I think, longtime listeners, of course, would be familiar with a lot of this. But I don't know, we never really dove headfirst into it because it was rather distasteful. I don't suggest that we do that now. But if you're not a longtime listener, perhaps this comes as some surprise to you. Our next section here, the alt-right label is tricky to define, but the movement's top priority is elevating the status of white men. I suppose that's probably true for some of them, if not all of them. I definitely want to reiterate that that point made earlier, that we're really talking about a very strange amalgam of people on the fringes that came together under this alt-right umbrella, and not all of them, I don't even know if all of them have come away with racism and explicit white supremacy at the center of their ideology, but it is an excellent method of achieving what I still consider to be the chief and defining characteristic of alt-right operatives, which is the insistence that everything be expressed in extremist terms. It's, I think, without fail, any true alt-right operative that you run into feels that it seems like their top priority is to see how far they have to go to offend. Hopefully they don't have to work too hard. But if they have not offended you in some way, they don't feel like they have actually engaged in discourse with you. And sometimes it's throwaway Nazism, and sometimes it has to be more hardcore in order to get you to react to it. But that seems to be chiefly what they're after. Don't let the term alt-right fool you, the article continues, despite the fact that it's the self-chosen descriptor adopted by many white supremacists. The ideology under the hood is still the same. Not only do members of the alt-right support the most extreme version of Trump's campaign promises to deport millions of immigrants and create a national registry for Muslims, but their ultimate goal is to ethnically cleanse non-white individuals from America and establish a completely white ethno-state. I believe that the alt-right is comprised of, I don't know whether the parts are equal, but in part by people who actually do believe in this and desire to see it happen, and others who simply know that it is a tool that works to get a rise out of people, and you can push them off criticism of your more controversial policy views that you genuinely hold by allowing them instead to focus on and criticize white supremacy that and ethno-nationalism that you might not really even hold as a policy position at all. It's simply, we know that people will turn their dogs loose on that. And to the extent that you don't believe in it, so much the better. They're now focusing their fire on something that you would be perfectly happy to jettison from your platform, such as it is, and instead just implement the rest. But there are certainly hardcore supporters of it among their numbers too. I said it's the most diverse, non-diverse group you can come up with. Members of the alt-right tend to be young white men sprouting facial hair, but spouting blatantly racist, nationalist, and misogynistic views that align eerily well with historical fascism. And many of these men openly advocate harassment and discrimination, or worse, of women and minority groups. Indeed, since the election, overt tension surrounding these various spheres has led to hundreds of reported hate crimes. Consequently, many people have pondered whether the alt-right label puts too fine a polish on what is at best an ugly mix of racism, xenophobia, and misogyny. In response, many news organizations have grappled with whether it's appropriate to use the term at all, and if so, how to define it for their readers. But no matter what you call it, the movement is plainly built around a political agenda that seeks to advance the rights of white male citizens at the expense of everybody else. The alt-right's indoctrination process starts out looking like a healthy way for men to socialize. Not to me it doesn't, but okay. Moving on. In a widely shared Twitter thread the morning after the election, writer Sianda Mohutsiwa, good stab at that. I don't know. Sianda seems easy enough to figure out how to pronounce Mohutsiwa. Well, Sianda will have to tell me. But you'll find her not that way, but as Sianda writes. That is, as in picks up a pen and puts it to paper, W-R-I-T. So Siynda, Sianda, writes, W-R-I-T-E-S. And you can follow along not only with this thread that was put together on November 9th, but on what she's doing today. But here comes the Twitter thread from Sianda, who outlined what she views as the insidious process by which young men are radicalized into the alt-right. And keep that in mind. Radicalized into. Yes, that's a purposeful usage. Sianda writes, if people followed the alt-right groups on Reddit, they would know that young white Americans were told to hide their support of Trump. I believe we have read through this tweet storm, by the way, but it's a good reminder. These college-educated young men were then ripe enough to be sold the idea that Trump represented a return to men being real men. Hence the pickup truck mania of late. Many of these radical white men were raised by single feminist mothers. Internet groups radicalized their sexual frustration into bigotry. Why were they so sexually frustrated? I don't know that it has anything to do with single feminist motherhood, but they can certainly be convinced of that. If that seems to be prevalent in the backgrounds of many of them, I suppose it would make sense to them to blame it for whatever problems they were having. And I don't know that their problems were so extraordinary either. Geez, I can't get a girlfriend. Well, welcome to life since, Australopithecus, guys. It's a difficult thing to do, to get and maintain a relationship of any kind. That's not easy. It's the nature of humanity. But I'm sure the answer is on the internet. After all, every problem I've ever had with my computer has been fixed by asking the question on the internet. So surely the secret to human relations is also on the internet somewhere as well. Oh, look, it's right here next to Nazism. Natural enough. I'll just continue on from here. These online groups found young white men at their most vulnerable and convinced them liberals were colluding to destroy white Western manhood. Sure, why not? There's a pizza place with pedophilia ring involved in the basement, and also there's a giant conspiracy to keep you from being recognized by women around the world as the sensitive genius you really are. And no amount of Pokemon t-shirts will hold you back, right? Okay. Anyway, when we talk about online radicalization, we always talk about Muslims, but radicalization of white men online is at astronomical levels. Yes. Again, purposeful parallel. Right? As we commented on this over the weekend and got responses back from people via Twitter. Gee whiz, the promise of endless women in paradise. Where does that sounds familiar. Where have I heard that before? So Sianda's, I'll stick to her first name because I think I can mangle that less. Sianda's tweet storm elucidates an important, generally overlooked point. Most white men who become radicalized into the alt-right start out in search of some like-minded friends. Though various branches of the movement are often at odds with one another. See the current fight between different branches of the alt-right over the deplorable that they are having on inauguration evening. Not the eve of inauguration, but afterwards. Though they're often at odds with one another, they share a number of core beliefs. To me, I think the core belief they share, of course, is in finding ever more creative ways of antagonizing enemies. Anyway, a core meme-flavored vernacular as well that served to unite them in what is sometimes called the manosphere. This realm includes the men's rights movement. Can you sense the scare quotes there? Pickup artist culture. Yes, a community of men also labeled PUAs, pickup artists, that essentially make a game of the art of bedding women. Incels, that is, men who are involuntarily celibate because they feel women reject them. And geek gatekeepers, like supporters of the Gamergate movement. On the surface, PUA communities and incel communities have a lot of generic appeal. The PUA lifestyle emphasizes self-esteem and confidence building along with physical health, while the incel community allows men to bond over their struggle to achieve all of the above in spite of their sour luck with women. Meanwhile, gamers and geeks habitually tout the importance of gaming in providing social interaction for young men. I guess young men who are unable to clear the hurdles of understanding human relationships through the fantastic advice they're getting online over how to fool women into having sex with them or drug them into having sex with them, which, geez, it's, I don't know what to tell you. That's not going to work, and it's not a really good idea, but apparently this is... now, of course, I would anticipate an explosion in this because, of course, we've found out that the incoming president values the same things. And the secret of his success was becoming a star and becoming so successful that it doesn't matter. He can get away with whatever he wants, and he can grab women wherever he wants, and they all love it, and they let you do it. How can you do it if you're not a star? Well, follow our online advice board, I guess, and you too can enjoy the benefits of tips on how to deny that what you are involved in is a sex cult and that you are involved in not only the perpetuation of rape culture in America, but in a mass epidemic of sexual molestation and rape sweeping the campuses of America and elsewhere. Okay. Now that you're excused from fault for this, we'll continue on. These spaces foster the kind of male friendship whose importance doesn't get a lot of attention in the real world. Oh no, please don't tell me we need to pay more attention to these people as well. White working class Midwesterners in dying small towns, and now guys who can't get girlfriends. This is a problem we have not been paying enough attention to. Everybody's a snowflake. But the benefits of their existence are often accompanied and sometimes negated by their tendency to instill in their members a newfound articulation of fundamental anxiety over their position as men in a society where women are actively seeking empowerment. Therefore, obviously, Nazism. And in building its membership from so many different communities of white men who ultimately feel threatened and rejected by women, the movement promotes a sense of male entitlement that is easily radicalized into white nationalism and white supremacy. And, of course, you can see why they fall in line, like I said, behind somebody like Donald Trump in particular. All of the bugs become features with him. Now on to the main topic, how sexism serves as the alt-right's gateway drug. In many alt-right communities, men are encouraged to view women as sexual and or political targets that men must dominate. The men in these communities don't see themselves as sexist. They see themselves as fighting against their own emasculation and sexual repression at the hands of strident feminists. For instance, one alt-right blog described the activist group Code Pink as, quote, a sort of liberal feminist version of the Westboro Baptist Church. And so on progressive grounds alone, they must hate them with a misogynistic passion, you see. It all makes sense, even if you're coming at this originally from a liberal point of view. All of these individual communities advocate a distrust of feminism and an insistence that female empowerment necessarily disempowers men. One of the most famous, Reddit's r/the red pill, even paints this ideology as a religious conversion, an awakening, or taking the red pill, a reference borrowed from The Matrix, to understand what they regard as the life-altering, quote, truth that feminism has ruined modern society for everyone, but especially for men, and especially for me in particular because I don't have a girlfriend, I guess. Many who've tried engaging with the red pill group only to walk away have described it as a place where relationships are viewed primarily in terms of power struggles rather than mutual respect and equality. Why are these guys having such difficulty finding girlfriends? I wonder. In practice, one Reddit user wrote, their ideas become pretty toxic really fast. Redditor RZRTV experienced this firsthand. He found his way to the red pill after witnessing his father's painful experience in court during a messy divorce. He told Vox that despite being socially progressive for most of his life, he had been drawn to the movement's anti-feminist message, feeling resentment for the way feminism seemed to be blaming white men for everything. I was grateful for the community to be raising points that affected my father and my life, he told Vox, noting that Reddit's various men's rights forums were full of great points, quote-unquote great points, about how society expects men to be emotionally reserved. Of course, so do you. And have a pickup truck. But they also provided a basic form of support in acknowledging that men were allowed to be emotional, flawed humans, which he found to be a big selling point. I guess so long as the emotion is, fry all the Jews, it's their fault, and I hate all bitches. Okay. Of course, many feminists frequently point out that gender stereotypes about men are unfair, harmful, and need dismantling. But feminists and men's rights activists, commonly referred to as MRAs, rarely listen to each other. Neither side seems to accurately assess its tribalism, he said. That is RZR TV. RZR spent nearly 2 years in the community, but gradually soured on its message due to the overwhelming hatred, which got to the point where everything seemed to be about taking down women or minorities rather than helping men in the areas they faced discrimination, he said. The tipping point, where I was finally fed up, is memorable. There was an article posted to r/men's rights with the title, Hillary Clinton will be worse for men than Donald Trump will be for women, which I knew was complete BS. The blatant BS allowed to propagate in the community had finally reached a boiling point, and I stopped putting effort into some of these same causes. It's important to note that while sexism and bigotry ultimately drove RZR TV away from Reddit's men's rights communities, he said he never sought out a great deal of emotional support from them to begin with. Quote, as I'm a pretty private person and don't seek that type of thing out. But other men who do lean on these communities for emotional support may be prone to falling further into the hate-filled environment. Sianda argued in her tweet storm that we have been paying the wrong kind of attention to the alt-right's internet havens. When we talk about online radicalization, we always talk about Muslims, but the radicalization of white men online is at astronomical levels, she wrote. That's why I never got one strategy of Clinton's campaign, highlighting Trump's sexism. Trump supporters love him because of his sexism. Well, I don't think anybody thought there were that many in sympathy with his sexism out there as active voters. I would be my guess about the strategy portion of this. The alt-right's vernacular is full of sexist language. Weak moderates or liberals who buy into the feminist agenda are deemed cucks, a term derived from cuckold, the arcane Old English word for a man whose wife cheats on him. Many of the movement's various sub-communities have insisted that the word is, warning, the following two links, which you'll see in our roundup, contain hate speech. Ready? They have insisted that the word is strictly racist and that its origins center on white men being disempowered by miscegenation and other forms of interaction with members of other races. In other words, in their minds, when they accuse you of being a cuck or having been cucked, it's not simply the arcane Old English word for a man whose wife cheats on him, but rather, in the modern context, a man who not only is the victim of this cheating, but somehow either actively encourages it or seeks it out, and that the cheating be done by white wives with black men. It's ultimately disempowering. And also, guess what? Disempowers you because of your racist belief that you are superior to the black man who's cuckolding you. Or if I don't even know if I can understand all the interrelationships properly, but that's supposed to make it just that much more embarrassing for some reason. Embarrassing / empowering, because it's apparently happening to a bunch of them, and they're using that to launch themselves into this new reality as a newly empowered alt-right strike force. And I will take down women and minorities both because of this imagined problem. Imagined / maybe kind of sort of weirdly, oddly desired problem. It's a very weird thing. And then you're getting into all sorts of psychosexual problems that these guys have that let's put it this way. I won't diagnose over the air because I want to finish this article instead, and I'll just get myself in trouble elsewise. Okay. So, important to note that the cuck thing to them also has racist origins for them in their view, in their usage of the word. But in its practical use by the alt-right at large, most frequently to harass women online, the common implication is that progressive men are sexually disempowered by manipulative women. This ideology inevitably has political ramifications. On PUA forums, where men proudly talk about their lay counts, yes, the default assumption in the days leading up to the election was that a vote for Hillary Clinton signified weakness that no real man would display. Pickup trucks. Witness this exchange that took place on one PUA forum the morning after the election. Joe91 wrote and is quoted as writing, "I wonder if a vote for Trump means a rejection of SJWs, social justice warriors, and third wave feminism," they love to attach third wave on that, "and extreme leftism in general, and a vote for Hillary means the opposite. Doubt it's that simple, though. If it is, we're screwed because half the country would be an extremes, leftists, SJW, feminist cuck." Never mind that it doesn't make any sense. And then the response by whoever was writing this, a response to this quoted bit here. "My thoughts exactly, and one of the reasons I voted for him. Hopefully, this pegs women down a bit as they were getting a little bit too full of themselves / out of hand. The women, you're getting out of hand." He was getting laid less. You're all getting out of hand. No more politics for you. The basic idea that women are getting too out of hand is the patriarchal common denominator, and it aligns perfectly with male rage against social justice activism, which in turn paves the way for white nationalism and white supremacy to gain a foothold. The alt-right's ongoing fight against social justice warriors fuels a larger campaign of white supremacy. Again, one of Sianda's earlier tweets, these online groups found young white men at their most vulnerable and convinced them liberals were colluding to destroy Western manhood. I guess that's how they come to believe things like Comet Pizza stories. Real men don't approve of pedophilia dungeons in their pizza joints. Why? A real man would take an AR-15 and drive hours and hours to free those kids for America. Over the past few years, Gamergate and male-centric Reddit communities have popularized the idea of social justice warriors, commonly abbreviated as SJWs. This disparaging label is an updated way to accuse progressives of extreme political correctness. The SJW label is a huge and successful weapon in the alt-right's arsenal. It paints feminists as manipulative, oversensitive, shrill women who attack men with claims of sexism at the tiniest of provocations while rejecting their sexual advances. That's the real crime, of course. Men who deploy the SJW attack seek to reestablish control and agency over the cultural conversation by ridiculing progressive attempts to seek greater diversity and representation in media and to dismiss basically anything that could be deemed multiculturalism or representation. See Gamergate and this year's Ghostbusters backlash. However, nested within the alt-right's fight against SJWs is a flagrantly radical white supremacist element. Members of the alt-right frequently refer to progressive culture as cultural Marxism, a favored catchphrase of Breitbart founder Andrew Breitbart, who is now dead, as you know. The academic term cultural Marxism is a positive one that denotes the spread of Marxist values throughout culture, but its common use today is much more pejorative. Members of the alt-right view SJWs, who are actively trying to make art and culture more inclusive, as attempting to incite socio-cultural and socioeconomic upheaval under the guise of diversity. In fact, the term cultural Marxism is descended from actual Nazi propaganda, a distrust of modernism, and the spread of non-Germanic culture that Hitler called cultural Bolshevism. In his book, A History of Nazi Germany, 1919 to 1945, historian Joseph W. Bendersky notes that the phrase was code for the cultural purging that preceded the Holocaust. Hitler referred to cultural Bolshevism as a disease that would weaken the Germans and leave them prey to the Jews, Bendersky writes. A moral struggle was underway, and the outcome would determine the survival of the race. This updated alt-right version of this idea primarily targets feminists and progressives as the instigators of this cultural demise. Their belief in insidious cultural plots against white patriarchy leads them to overlap and interact with another branch of the alt-right, the innumerable online right-wing conspiracy groups that see Jewish, Islamic, and foreign plots in perceived attacks on white patriarchal culture. The all-or-nothing urgency and the blatant nationalism and white supremacy of Hitler's version of the phrase is still intact. And next up in the sequence here, embedded tweets, including some of the famous alt-right memes. This one, a picture of Trump speaking at an event of some kind with the family behind him and lots of flags as well. Brexit victory was a punch in the guts to the left. Trump victory is a knockout uppercut to the jaw. Very manly. The left has been knocked to the canvas as the West fights back against cultural Marxism and Islam. This from the Truthophobes group, a name which makes no sense. Truthophobes there tweeting, the Trump victory marks an important moment in history, capital H. It was the day good people stood up and defeated evil cultural Marxism. Defeated evil. There's no punctuation in this, you see. It should be period. Then cultural Marxism has been smashed. Another tweet here. Regressive left has climaxed with Trump and Milo effect, and 20 years of conditioning of cultural Marxism will soon be laid to rest. Also utter nonsense. I don't even have any idea what that's supposed to mean. Now, on with the article. In essence, many men who were drawn to these communities because they wanted to get laid and gain self-confidence have found themselves embroiled in a culture war. One that started as a way to boost individual male autonomy and evolved into a way to wrest back control of the country, nay, the world, from shrill feminists and their weakling cuck supporters, which include libtard shills in the mainstream media. You see a lot of this. And now it's starting, perhaps, to ring a bell if you haven't connected all of this stuff. And it's interesting, too, right? They basically just came there wanting to get laid and gain self-confidence. And who better as a role model than the guy who has limitless self-confidence and insists that it results in him getting laid all the time, even though it's really just a series of rapes, Donald Trump. Sionda tweets again to set up the next section. Young men came to these online groups for tips on picking up girls and came out believing that it was up to them to save Western civilization. Ultimately, these groups found their hero in Donald Trump. And here another screen cap from the Reddit online communities. Someone saying, no, we're the majority. We need to deport the 11 million illegals before they breed like Catholic rabbits. Interesting. The Catholic rabbits they are, or they'll become the government-dependent majority who will gladly vote in another globalist cabal. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. And then, make America great again. Rawr. Americanism, not globalism, will be our new credo. It's very, interestingly, it's very Soviet era in its use of all caps and exclamation points and superlatives. Gamergate, the next section. Gamergate foreshadowed the alt-right's rise and created an unsettling template for the movement to expand. In the wake of Trump's victory, many have pointed to Gamergate's sexist assault on feminism as a harbinger of things to come. Far more than the fringe components of the alt-right, the Gamergate movement drew mainstream attention from its beginnings in August of 2014 and gained extensive coverage from popular geek media outlets as well as international news organizations as it grew. Though it peaked around the spring of 2015, the movement is still active. Writing at The Guardian, Matt Lees points out that its supporters' techniques of harassment and rhetorical victim blaming have become the standard toolset of the far-right voices online. I'll have to agree in all of that. And again, point out the parallels in both the gamer version and the political version. The aim is still the same. If your rhetorical points aren't scoring converts, you can blame that on international feminist conspiracy, and you can shoo out of the conversation anybody but those who were essentially there as your cheerleaders by then serially and increasingly offending everyone else involved in the conversation until they all leave, and then you just say they all left because they're weak and they're cucks, therefore proving my point. All I do, I engage in an online discussion with somebody, and I send them Nazi imagery and pictures of themselves photoshopped into gas chambers, and say I'm going to find out where they live and rape their whole families until they finally leave, and then say, see, only a cuck would have left. I was right all along. That's the basic theme of how these things go. Writers who've reported on and or been targeted by Gamergate have also noted the convergence of the group's membership with that of the alt-right. David Futrell is a journalist who spent the last 5 years maintaining a men's rights watch blog, We Hunted the Mammoth. In an email to Vox, he said that it's close to impossible to overstate the role of Gamergate in the process of alt-right radicalization. From the start, he says, Gamergate was based on the same sense of aggrieved entitlement that drives the alt-right and many Trump voters. While Trump warned of the putative dangers of Muslims and Mexicans, quote, invading America, Gamergaters talked about the dangers of so-called social justice warriors invading the world of gaming. Which is amazing because who cares? It's just a bunch of games, but don't tell them that. Many defined gaming as a male space, or even a male-safe space, and so it was no coincidence that they focused so much of their anger on supposed female interlopers, including gaming cultural critics like Anita Sarkeesian, Zoe Quinn, Brianna Wu, and others. By presenting themselves as beleaguered defenders of gaming's safe space, Gamergaters managed to convince themselves that their harassment of people like Sarkeesian and Quinn was in fact a defense of an imperiled culture. They were saving the world. And interestingly, with a variant of the thing I just shared with you too, like I guess they could say, well, certainly they took their games seriously and they didn't want anyone interfering with them, but they, I'm sure, occasionally defended feminist critiques of sexist bias in gaming culture and the games themselves. I mean, you don't have to search that hard to find it. It's your standard comic book type stuff. All the female characters in video games tend to be Barbie doll shaped and proportioned fantasy women that don't really do anything in particular in the game except entice the men that are there. And if a woman critic points that out and says, why do we even need to have that? All, you know, you shoot them up in this game just the same. You score points in the game just the same. It doesn't have to be with these ridiculous caricatures of women. If you're here for the game, play the game. Well, they're here for both. And curiously enough, they probably thought, okay, well, this is worth defending because it's important to me and I spend all my time here. But interestingly, I can probably try and dismiss this criticism by saying, who cares whether there's a bias? Who cares whether we have positive female role models in this space anyway? One, it's 90% male. I don't know if that was really a true claim, but even if it was, it wouldn't matter because it's even worse that it is 90% male. Now men are coming away with these ridiculous ideas about females and female characters in general, and that's horrible. And one of the things that they come out with is, by the way, is the rhetorical device of referring to women as females. I don't know why I just bothered to do that, but I guess the word female is in front of me here. But yeah, so curiously, I bet they probably initially defended these things by saying, you know, we don't really have to be in compliance with political correctness. We don't really have to be in compliance with social justice tenets. It's all just a game, so why don't you just leave us alone? And I'm sure for some people, it's probably fine. There are people who play these games and they see these objectified pictures of women and they say, that's ridiculous, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't really register with me. I'm here to play the game and that's it. And when I leave the game and go back into the real world, I realize people are what they are and it doesn't matter whether women in the real world look like the ridiculous pictures we create of them in comic books and video games, but for a vast number. That is not the case, and they can't adjust. So they defend themselves, though, that way by saying, don't bring your criticisms here. We're just trying to escape, after all. This isn't our view of the real world. But for many people it is, and so the criticism is legitimate. And instead of ignoring it, they decide they're going to push it out. And the way they know to push it out is to threaten. And to tell people, I threaten you, I will track you down, I'll hurt you, I'll harm you, I'll rape you, what have you, in the hopes that they'll just go away. And then they won't ever really have to answer for the insanity of threatening somebody with rape. They'll have gone away. There's no consequence in the world. There's no place you can be dragged in to answer for these crimes. After all, I've made my threats anonymously over a bulletin board. And in the main, they do, in fact, get away with most of that. So continuing on with the article here, one of the feminist targets of Gamergate was gaming journalist, remember it's all about ethics in gaming journalism, Lee Alexander, who recently wrote about the movement's expansion and convergence with the alt-right movement. We should probably read that someday, too. When I was harassed in an attempt to get me to abandon progressive critical stances on the relationship between pop culture and politics, during the embarrassment that was Gamergate, everyone told me it was just a radar blip, she wrote. They said the hit pieces on Breitbart about me, and it's important to note that they were on Breitbart, other women and progressive voices in technology were just fringe issues. We should not give them any more attention, everyone said. They couldn't have been more wrong. Now the CEO of Breitbart, Steve Bannon, is an advisor to incoming President Trump. And in the last few weeks, all these same old people, the dross, D-R-O-S, dross, not a word I'm familiar with, of image board culture with their same assembly line right-wing memes are back in my Twitter timeline letting me know they won. Quote unquote. These people's fears, their power fantasies are now steering the world, and it is an enormous problem. So they were looking to intervene and stop this. Oh no, don't worry about it. They're just playing their games. They're just living their comic book culture. They just want to be left alone. Outside of the world, it's not going to have any impact. It's not going to make any difference. Well, for too many of them it did, and guess what? Now they think they're running the show. Futrell pointed out to Vox that Gamergate's explicit sexism led many of its members to 4chan, and to 4chan's even more extreme sibling 8chan, which became a haven for Gamergate after the movement was officially booted off 4chan for misogyny. In those enclaves, Futrell says, there were hordes of neo-quasi-Nazis, some ironic Nazis, but many others utterly sincere, ready to tell them that it wasn't just gaming that needed saving, but Western civilization itself. And why not? That's so much more important sounding. Now I'm fighting for something meaningful and lasting. I thought, my brothers in arms in the wider world would laugh at me if I was out to fight for a safe gaming space. But if I can disguise it as Western civilization itself, well, now I have a sense of purpose. He continued, they weren't fighting for the right to look at boobs in video games anymore, but fighting against white genocide. Suddenly, the weirdly inflated, often melodramatic rhetoric of Gamergate made more sense. Gamergate-inspired violence also presaged the wave of hate crimes that have been reported since the election. Examples from the past 2 years include the threat of a mass shooting at a major public university because the university hosted Gamergate enemy Anita Sarkeesian, the many pro-rape statements made on PUA hubs and social media accounts by prominent pickup artists like the notorious internet troll Roosh V, who bragged about committing rape, and finally the 2014 mass stabbing and shooting of 6 UC Santa Barbara students by Elliot Rodger, a man who fortified his misogyny and sense of alienation via the incel communities he frequented online. Wow. And by the way, you would think, if there was any logic to any of this stuff, right? Like, if I come to a PUA community, I need tips on picking up girls. And if they say, just get a knife or a gun and rape them, I'd be like, well, gosh, not only is that just a bad idea in general, but if I came here for what I consider to be quality pickup artist advice, I would say, you're cheating. You're not really a qualified expert in how to pick up. I'm I know you can go out there with weaponry and attack people and rape them. That's not it. I didn't need that solution. I was looking for, what can I say to a woman that will make her like me? Not, what kind of weapon can I use to kill her after I rape her or force her to have sex with me? That's insane. It's interesting that they didn't bother to weed that out. Like, that somehow raping people, I guess, and it grew out of the sense of entitlement. Like, well, here's what you do. Take her out to dinner, take her to the movies, buy her expensive gifts. Then she'll have sex with you, because women are essentially shallow and are only after material gratification. That, of course, doesn't work for you, because none of it is true. And then they convince you, well, you spent that much money. The only reason, because we still believe that that's true, you spent all that money. Now you're just talking about somebody who's a willfully ungrateful bitch, and they should just be raped, because that's the answer. You spent the money, you're entitled to the sex. And it's not really rape anymore, because you bought the ticket. It's that they've really convinced themselves of that. And I guess it's a short leap from there to just rape anybody. I mean, I guess if you want to become a celebrity in pickup artist hubs, initially you would think people would say, no, you're doing the wrong thing. You're actually ridiculous. You got to get out of here. And I guess at some point some of these places did. 4chans booted them off, and they went to the 8chans. And there were other people who said, I'm originally here at the PUA hub because I don't actually care about having a sustainable relationship. I really do just want to have as much sexual intercourse with as many women as possible, and the gun seems like a pretty good way to do it. And the rest of you who are too afraid to just become serial rapists are cucks. And somehow that worked. I don't know. It's an illness, and it's widespread. Continuing with the article, in light of the misogyny that seems permanently embedded within alt-right culture, it does seem permanent, it probably shouldn't come as a surprise that the movement's favored presidential candidate also once bragged about sexually assaulting women. Trump may not fit the pattern of online activity that leads so many men to the alt-right fold, but he has planted himself within an online alt-right echo chamber. His ideas are informed by an emboldening to a growing collective of men who view the subordination of women as part of a functional society and a stepping stone to a larger movement, one steeped in fascist ideology and willing to openly champion hate as a political cause. The ease with which the alt-right channels male insecurity around women's rights into an ideology of white supremacy ultimately illustrates that the paths by which men wander into the alt-right movement are deceptive. While many of the movement's male-centered online communities may seem to offer something of value to the men who join them, the alt-right movement has never been about helping men cope with low self-esteem, relationship problems, or their personal pain and insecurity. In fact, it's never particularly concerned itself with building up men as individuals at all. Instead, it's about maintaining a sense of power at all costs over an ever-expanding list of designated targets. And with Trump's victory, the movement now has more power than ever. Isn't that exciting and wonderful and reassuring to know? I know that was horribly depressing, but I feel like we needed to give ourselves a quick reminder of exactly what was going on, and come to grips with the fact that even the people who exist in the fringes of these online groups and who otherwise would be considered not to have any power or connections to power whatsoever, and they may not, are in their view, one of their own has risen to become president of the United States, one of their own with whom they would likely feel even more connection, has risen to become the chief advisor to the incoming president of the United States. They will manifest these feelings in ways that will endanger those physically around them, and these people are dispersed throughout the country. It's an enormously dangerous problem. They don't realize that Donald Trump and even Steve Bannon will likely have no interest whatsoever in coming to their defense, and ultimately that's a good thing, I hope, that these people will suffer the consequences of their threats, and hopefully they'll suffer those consequences before those threats become made real. But they have. I don't know. I guess they just have no idea what they think they've walked into a world in which all of the things about which they have only fantasized online will now become legal. And I assume we're in for a second wave of what we saw immediately after the election, post-inauguration. It has died down a little bit. Some of the initial excitement about the winning the election, thankfully, ended up finally. It didn't suppress it entirely, but the frequency and heat that accompanied the post-election hate crimes and other racist and misogynist incidents has waned. I assume we see them ramp back up in the hours leading up to the inauguration and for a few days afterwards. Hopefully it dies down after that point, but it's going to be a tough sell. I mean, they're going to have a lot more weapons at their disposal inside the Trump administration for keeping that momentum going. Having seized control of the government and all the media circus that surrounds it, I don't know what we're going to have to watch and see how quickly this fervor dies down, if it dies down. And they now have the mechanism to drive it and continue its growth. We now have, of course, we know that they're after the names of individual government employees that worked on various projects that they consider a part of social justice warrior, the social justice warrior agenda, and varied bits of the cuckoldry, I guess, that they hate so much, and they can pursue those people and make it a daily political issue and do it all on television in suits and ties before members of the press holding recorders out there bound by some bizarre covenant to report it exactly as stated and to do so in the interest of telling both sides of the story. We may be doomed. I am not sure, but we'll be here to comment on it for as long as they let us, I guess. But then we'll give up and go to the gulag like cucks, I guess. Unless, of course, we manage to find a way to continue to fight back. So, that's what we'll be here for. That's what we'll be advising. That's what Daily Kos will be doing. I guess I'll have some interesting announcements in the coming days about what I'll be doing to try and help that effort move forward. We'll see whether it impacts our ongoing radio schedule. I am sure that it will to some extent, but perhaps you'll find that just as exciting as providing a daily synopsis of all the nonsense that's going on. There's much more to discuss, many more things that I discovered over the weekend related to this that will give us our opportunity to consider our own both sidesism, like we sometimes are willing to concede doing here. In the meantime, time to hand the microphones over to the guys on the after show to pick up on all of the important news themes that I missed by covering the nonsense of the alt-right's genesis. What kind of stuff is included under investigation on corruption charges? Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu caught on tape negotiating favorable press coverage in exchange for business benefits. While China's state newspaper warns Trump that China will take revenge if moves are afoot to end the One China policy, U.S. Senator Ted Cruz and Texas Governor Greg Abbott met with the president of Taiwan in Houston yesterday. And Trump's Pee Wee Herman hand puppet Kellyanne Conway blames Meryl Streep for inciting people's worst instincts. I know, it's crazy out there with Meryl Streep.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
So do stay tuned. The after show will take this up and much more. Also important news from Cabinet World. It looks like Trump could lose retired General James Mattis before Inauguration Day. And in a glorious victory for anti-intellectualism, Trump supporters see the wealthiest cabinet ever as no problem as long as the Donald gets rid of all the smart people. Stay tuned.